Hey guys, it's Ted Bogert. Welcome back to the TED Show. This is one of my favorite series we have on the TED Show. Here is always welcome. It's Warrior Wednesday. I have two U.S. Army veterans on the show with me today. Of course, we have our CEO at Future Home Loans. Robert Lynn is with us. He's with me every week. He comes on and gives us his insights and what's going on in the world as far as mortgages go. And this week, we have my dear friend, Jorge Figueroa is on the show. He's also a U.S. Army veteran. He can describe what that's all about. We're going to talk about not just military service and veterans, but what veterans can do when they transition out. We're going to talk about the real estate world. Most recently, Jorge made a move in his real estate career. We're going to talk about that, coaching, and all sorts of good things. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Ted. It's an honor to be here finally on the TED Show. I love it.
Finally on the TED Show. It's an honor for you to be here, buddy. You and I have been friends for a while. You've got this amazing work ethic, this awesome family. I love your family, and you guys built this new team, and I want to talk all about that. But before we do, we want to do intros. So we'll start with Rob, and then Jorge, we'll get to you. Robert Lynn, tell them a little bit about you, your service, and what you do now if they don't know already.
Yeah, hey, I'm Robert Lynn, founder of Future Home Loans. I was in the Army in the 90s, so it's kind of more like the Boy Scouts as opposed to the last 20 years. But I was there, and I enjoyed my time and learned a lot, and actually was a Russian linguist in the Army. So yeah, it's been real interesting paying attention to what's going on in Europe right now. But I'm super excited to meet Jorge. I'd love to hear about his team and see what's going on with him.
Perfect. Well, thank you. All right, Jorge, it's you now. We love an origin story here. So they kind of want to know your point A to point B and then how you transitioned out. Because for a lot of veterans, that is one of the hardest things, is to get out and try to figure out what you want to do in a world that is not all about a brotherhood and sisterhood, and there's not that complete and utter trust that goes on in the military service. So tell us a little background on you, my friend.
Well, Robert mentioned the 90s. I was in the 80s, late 80s, and then go.
You muted yourself.
So I was late 80s into the 90s, so I feel like the only guy in the group, which I am. Look at this gray beard. So I joined, I was actually 17. I needed my mother's permission to go. So I joined in when I was 17, straight out of high school. I always wanted to go to military, so I was in the 7 Special Forces group out of Fort Bragg. We were assigned to Central and South America, which is great for me because my main language is Spanish. So that came in handy at that time. We had a great time with what we did and missions and being out there and meeting people. It allowed me to see things that I never thought I would see. It gave me an appreciation for now in life for what we have, what we protect. What we fight for. It was I lived in interesting times. So I was out of Fort Bragg, and after the military, I went back home. My home is Puerto Rico. So I went back home, and you talk about adaptation, and I see that nowadays, right? I see technology has gotten so great that it's a blessing and sometimes a curse. We have more people living, but we have more people living, with more injuries, with certain things coming back. But I can tell you, we're doing a better job taking care of our veterans. But there's so much work to do. I know when I came out, I had some adaptation problems, coming back home. This is something that it's actually the first time I talk about it. Ever in a public setting. So I have some adaptation problems coming back. I always been entrepreneurial, I guess. And one of the reasons on my exit, I says, I want to do a business. I want to do certain things. And I always had that mind. But I couldn't tell at the time what it was, but I was a little bit prone to I will snap in a second, not too helpful in the business world. Back then, and we didn't have a guide or somebody to guide me through that process. Fortunate enough, I always believe it starts with your mind. I was able to work on that and identify what the triggers were. And then number one is your mind, start identifying what is it that's going on and trying to start working on it. And number two for me is your support structure. So I found it in my wife, Yomari. She equalizes. Yep, absolutely. And a dear group of friends back then, close, and started working on it until, everything started working normally. But nowadays there are organizations and there are groups and there are all of that. There's plenty out there. We just have to seek it and get the word out. Because if you're coming out of the military and you want to adapt to the world, be in business and do all of these things, there are resources. We just need to be more vocal and get that word to the veterans.
That's one of the reasons why we do the show, is because I feel like there's a lot of veterans out there that struggle to make the transition out, to adapt. And so I love it when you all share your stories and your journey, because somebody out there is either going through it, thinking through it, trying to figure out what to do. And if they've got an entrepreneurial spirit, our real estate world is kind of a cool place to be, but they may not have anybody they know in it. They may not understand that it can make them money, that there is a way for them to be their own boss. So I want to ask you, Jorge, why did you choose real estate? How did that come into play?
Well, that was back home. I started with small businesses. I said, what can I do? I detail cars. I had big clients. I had all of this. I grew it into a kind of an enterprise. And then on I made one vacation trip with to New York, Maryland, and I have an ex-Army buddy, I called. I said, you're in Maryland, let's see each other. We haven't seen each other in years. But he was broke completely. And I said, come on over anyway. We spent the weekend, and when he was leaving, I gave him, I think it was like $500. And it's like, no. I said, if it was me, would you do it? Yeah, of course. He took it and left. 5 years after that, I make the same trip. I take my family. Let's go to New York. Let's go to Philadelphia, Maryland, Washington, D.C. And he says, you got to come see my house. You got to come to my house in Maryland. And he picked me up in a brand new car, 5 years, pull up to a brand new house. Hey, things are better. In the morning, he was a pilot. He was a chief. He used to fly Apaches, Blackhawks. And then this is my little airplane. I'm like, what? Wow. Got out of there, went to the Chesapeake. This is my new boat. And I'm like, wait a second, are we going to get arrested here? 5 years ago, what's going on? So in 5 years, he became a millionaire in the mortgage business. And I said jokingly in the table, I said, I'll be here with you next year doing that. I want that. I want all of that. I want to provide my family that way. And look, life is that way. I remember when I was back in Puerto Rico and I stopped at a Kentucky Fried Chicken parking lot and made that phone call and said, remember we spoke, I want to get into your business. He said, drop everything. I got you. I told my wife, we're going to Maryland. She's like thinking I'm joking. I started selling everything, cars, business, everything. And I went to Maryland, and that's how I started in the business, in the mortgage industry, actually, for Equitable Trust. And that's how I came in. So funny, it's connected to the military in that way because he's my brother. We said we're brothers all the time, but he's really white with green eyes. People look at us like we're crazy, but he is my brother. So that's how I started. And then after some years, I asked for a permission to open a branch in Orlando because it's more like home. It's blue sky, palm trees. Came to open an office here, a branch office. Second time we came in and to look for an apartment, my wife and I. She was 8 months pregnant. She loved it so much, she said, you go back and get the stuff. I'm staying. And that's how we started the journey in here in Florida. We opened a branch, and then, because I told my wife, look, we're generating all this business. As a mortgage, back then, my dynamics were different. I will not go to realtors and ask for business. I will generate the business. And then I will go to realtors and say, hey, here's a $300,000 buyer. Would you like it? Of course. Sure. Can we work together? Of course. It changed the dynamic completely. And at some point I told my wife, look, we're doing all of this. Why don't you get your real estate license? And we do this. This was when we're still in Maryland. And she did. She passed it. First month, she had a big check, and we have never looked back. So when we came here, then we ended up having our Casabella Lending Corporation and then our Casabella Real Estate Group. So in a macro, that's the story behind it.
Why did you decide? Let me give you.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to focus? You've really shifted your focus to real estate.
Actually, when the market changed. So we had these offices, we have everything going on, and we thought we're on top of the world. We know it all. We're making all this money. The world is ours, right? And then what happened in 2006, 2007? And we held on so long. We had, I believe, 3 branches, about 40 agents. We were not too big, but, I had no systems or shift systems in place. Are we there?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No systems in place to be prepared for that. And I can tell you, it was a very humbling experience for us. We held on too long. Not only, it affected our business, it affected our lives personally. So humbling. We went from doing all of this to literally not having, to provide for our kids, to provide for my little one, the one that no milk for this kid. I mean, it was dire. And I said, never again, God willing, I'm going to learn what these guys do in order to not only survive, but thrive. Because I saw some people survive and then I saw some people thrive. And I went and sat down with them and said, what do you do? What are you doing? And then, this nurturing and relationships, that's where I learned all of that. And I got passionate about it. And when we reinvented ourselves, we ended up only on the real estate side. We said, let's focus on this. And that's how I got to the new place and became a coach, all of that.
Now let's talk about the coaching, because I think that's what separates you out. I feel like your coaching program, your ability to coach, that all meshes incredibly well and sets you apart from a lot of other brokerages out there. So let's talk about the coaching part a bit, and then talk about how in your shift, because you've just moved to LPT, talk about what you're doing with that within the framework of LPT.
Yes, the coaching came about as a passion for what we went through. And I believe I follow Dr. Eric Thomas. He says also, understand your superpower and what it is. My mother was a teacher back then. I always says, no, I'll never do that. But when we went into this organization and I became a coach, I was passionate about it, but also certain things came natural to me. And I found myself on that element. And Tony Robbins talk about fulfillment, right? And I started feeling fulfilled. So this is a way to provide for the family, to do a great business, to generate great revenue while doing what fulfills me, while doing what I like and what I love. So I find myself blessed and lucky to be able to find that and be able to do that. And yes, we made the move now to LPT. And what we did is we took that coaching program that before you needed access, so we made it available. It's called Life on Your Terms. That's all I always say, on your terms, life on your terms. And we are able to put that in place now and try to affect as many agents out there possible so they don't have to go through what we had to go through. We learn everything by hitting a wall. So, if I can touch as many agents out there and give them a little bit and some of them take it and run with it, my job is done.
You do an amazing job at it, Jorge. All the feedback I've ever heard and your relationships. So kudos to you. Congratulations on the move. I want to ask you both, and I'll start with Rob. How are you feeling about the market going on? I get this question every time. And so especially when I have our CEO and then I have somebody who's long-term in the business on, there's a lot of chicken little, sky is falling scenarios out there. How do you all feel about what's going on this week? Because I feel like it changes on a regular basis. Rob, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So first thing, I did want to want to talk about Jorge's story. I mean, that was amazing to listen to, and it really is indicative of what it is to be a veteran, you know, in our community, where, you know, he gave a handout to one of his brothers, and he got it back tenfold, you know, and got a new career out of it. And, you know, even hearing him not want to talk about, you know, not talking about his transition and the stuff that he had for the first time talked about, that's a lot of what goes on in the veteran community. So I do want to thank you, Ted, for kind of getting us on here and talking about that, because that's a lot of the stuff that veterans deal with. We're kind of, you know, feel isolated, and anytime that you can get that community and come out and talk to people, it's awesome. So very cool story, Jorge. With the market, rates are rough. I mean, you know, they've gone up here significantly the last 60, 90 days. We just had a hurricane blow through the entire state of Florida. You know, I kind of feel like we've hit rock bottom in Florida real estate mortgage market here in the last 30 days. You know, that's at least the way I'm looking at it. I do think we're gonna kind of peak at rates by the end of this quarter, sometime in this quarter, and then it's gonna kind of start to ease back down, I feel like, next year, but it's gonna be slow. And, you know, quite honestly, I'm planning for 12 months like this, and kind of hope it stays like this, because it's going to get rid of like Jorge was talking about. You've got the folks that are surviving, you know, or the folks that are thriving. Us folks that are thriving are really going to be able to kick it up a notch and take it to a whole nother level, and kind of leave the landscape. You know, good companies are good when it's great conditions, but great companies thrive in bad conditions. And, you know, right now we've prepared for this, we've planned for this, and yeah, but it's still always going to be a buyer's market in Florida. Like they're not making any more Florida real estate. They're not making any more beach properties. Everybody wants to come down to the weather. It's gorgeous out right now. So
so pretty.
So it's going to stay that way in Florida for the long term.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like 2023 is going to be a lot of this, but it feels like it's going to be a little more stable, or at least we're going to get back to some sort of normalcy, whatever that looks like or feels like. And now you can hear the sirens. All right, Jorge, you tell us what your perspective is.
You asked for this week, but if you don't want, I'd like to zoom out a little and look at, you know, throughout history, what has happened. I lived one of this. I lived a shift in the market, an aggressive one. And like I mentioned before, there were some people who survive, some people who thrive. So there's a lesson there. You know, I love what Robert says. We're prepared. You know, we have a plan. So what's our plan? Everybody needs to get a plan and be prepared if you want to stay in this business, because there's opportunity. There's opportunity. Everybody is, God, the sky is falling. You know, it's 7% now. I was selling at 8% when I was in, you know, when I first came in the market, and we did great. So transactions are not going to stop. The market is shrinking, less transactions, but they're going to exist. It's going to push some people out, the ones that are not prepared, don't have a strategy. And then there's opportunity for the ones who stays to get their share and their own fair share, because these guys are not going to get those transactions. Let's go grab them. Let's stay in the business. Let's help. Let's help. So it takes preparation. It's going to exist. Have a plan. Have a strategy. That's one of the reasons we chose the ecosystem we chose now, because, you know, it allows us, with the tools that give us, and with some coaching and strategy, we can all be prepared. You know, now is the time not to panic, but to operate, right? And there's training, and we've been through this training, right, Robert? We've been through this training. Sure, it's scary, of course. You're going like, oh my goodness, but we got to operate within it. Is this the profession you chose, the business you chose to create? There's ways to stay in it. You just got to find where that is, what those things are, identify them, and then take action on them. That's how I see it. So that's why I'm not so worried if we're up 6.75 or 7.25, or if we're going to peak at 9, because there are going to be transactions out there. So my question always in my mind is, how do I operate within this scenario?
Absolutely. That's perfect.
All right. So perfect. See, I get caught up in what you two say, and then I realize I need to take over and start wrapping things up. Jorge, thank you so much for being on the show. I want everybody to be able to reach out to you, learn more about you, learn about your coaching, learn about your transition and your move over. What's the best way for them to find you and reach out to you?
Always a phone call. You know, we have the websites, we have all of these things available, obviously, but my phone is always available for somebody who's looking, especially if you're a veteran. This is about veterans, and you're not even if you're not in real estate and you're listening to this and you're entrepreneurial, reach out. I will take the time. I will take the time and pour into you guys. Whoever wants, I always said, if you want to give that step, you give that step. I'm here to help you take the next. So 407-620-9798. There's a website on the bottom also that leads you to our real estate side. So 407-620-9798, the website there. My coaching is called Life on Your Terms because we got to identify what is it that we want, look in the mirror and go forward, and I'm here available. Thank you for the opportunity, Ted. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you. Always have. Oh, look, he wrote the phone number down.
I wrote it down. When I come to Central Florida, I want to see Jorge. I like his positive energy. I want some of that.
Absolutely. Let's go. Let's go together. I love it.
You know what, Rob? He's like that all the time. It's contagious. So, and thankfully so, it's contagious. All right. Thank you both so much for your service. I have to say that every time. Thanks for being on the show. If you're a real estate person, a veteran of any kind, you want a story, you own a company, you want to come on the show, we'd love to have you because the ultimate goal here is to give back to the veteran community and get you to transition where you want to be, give you some ideas on how maybe you can make that transition or maybe get out of what you're doing and become more entrepreneurial. And that's why we bring everyone on. So thank you both so much. We'll see you next week on Heroes